Welcome to this edition of Chai and Why at Prithvi Theatre. Today we have Dr. Jyotishman Dasgupta from Department of Chemical Sciences at TIFR. Let us see what he has to tell us today.
Thank you, Mr. Kulkarni. It's a wonderful opportunity for me. Thank you for giving me this this particular forum to discuss the relevant energy issues that we are having in the country. So today I'm going to touch upon the important, the statistics that the country is right now facing in terms of energy shortage. Discuss that briefly. Introduce the problems, where the problems are, and then I'm going to just at the end show a little bit of what the scientists are doing towards solving this problem on different fronts. So that's basically the plan. The title I have put in a very specific way. It's the sunny side to the energy shortage, and you would say, what is so sunny about the energy shortage issue? Well, I'll come to that, but let's first discuss the major points. Just to get everybody up to speed, I have these very simple slides to start off with. We know the term energy, but how is it defined? Well, you can go from your everyday life. You experience something called sleep. After you are tired, you actually go to sleep. But once you have something like this in McDonald's or something, you are actually energetic. You have energy to perform tasks. Now that is essentially where the basic definition, yes, that's a baby, and that's the basic definition of energy comes. It's the ability of any physical system to do work on other physical systems. It also represents the state of the system. It is expressed in joules, but that's not the units you probably hear most of the time, unless you are more scientifically oriented. What you hear most of the time is watts, like your appliances, right? So that is power, and that is essentially what that means is what is the rate of work done, or the energy, how fast is the energy being converted to another form. So that is power. Now we all know we have different sources of energy, and we call them fuels. For us, food is a fuel to keep us running. So carbohydrates, sugars that we intake. Then you have fuels for your electricity generation, like coal, oil, and natural gas. And this is really important because you can do heating, or you actually run an automobile on these different sorts of sources of fuel. Now, what I have underneath the third line is really critical to our discussion today. And that is, how do we generate some form of energy through other indirect sources? Hydrothermal is what you probably have heard a lot. Then you have heard something about nuclear power plants. We all know there was a huge, an unfortunate incident that brought this whole concept of nuclear power plants into debate, whether we should have it, because in Japan recently, after the earthquake, or not the earthquake, essentially the volcanic disaster, you had this nuclear power plant that got affected, and the society as such in Japan got affected. Then we have the solar part, which I'm going to describe it to you in a lot of detail today, and I'll spend some time as to why we really need to move the solar way. Now, all fuels can be characterized by something. You have to have parameters to define a fuel. And this parameter is the calorific value, which tells you the amount of quantity of heat, okay? And the reason we do it in heat is because typically, classically, we think of engines being driven by heat or steam, okay? So that is why we always have this traditional definition of calorific value in terms of heat produced from a fuel, and just by burning a fuel. And these are given in joules per gram per amount of fuel that you have, and how much energy in joules you produce. These are the typical numbers, not to remember, but just to see a diverse range of numbers. Petrol, diesel are more or less the same you use for running your car. Hydrogen might be a future fuel, and just I'm comparing the calorific value. You can see it's at least 1/4 of petrol and diesel. But remember, it's a carbon neutral. It doesn't have any emission for carbon dioxide. So this is going to be one of the future fuels. So look out for these in your vehicles. Methane and vegetables that we eat. So those are some of the numbers to give you a feel. Now, when we talk about efficiency, this is really the critical word in this. Energy efficiency. This is a very important word. You must have seen on your refrigerators something called rating, efficiency rating. I think everybody has noticed. Yeah, and there's number of stars you see. This is because the government is implementing policies to look at efficiency for appliances. And why does this, this word come into picture is because we want to have as much energy that you put in through fuels to be translated into work, work that can be done. So suppose your refrigerator is cooling down your vegetables, right? It's doing some work. So it has to take electrical energy and do that. So that has to be an efficient process. So now let's understand this, why this is such a big deal. Well, I just have put an icon up here. 2011 actually is the International Year of Chemistry. So we are trying to propagate chemistry a lot this particular year. There is something very important also that happened this year. Everybody probably remembers. So India won the World Cup, okay? And this is after 20, roughly, how many? 28 years. Thank you for that. This is a picture of, the batsman. I'm pretty sure you know the batsman. Yuvraj Singh, okay. So hitting 6 sixes in 1 over is very rare. Gary Sobers did it in a test match at some point of time. And so this is a really, really rare event. But just think of this. Every ball, okay, if you can hit for a 6, you can score 1,800 runs, right? You can score, well, give or take the extras. You forget the extras. You can score 1,800 runs in a one-day game. That has never been done, right? You only reach scores up to 250. This is roughly the score in last 35 years of one-day game. Why is that? There could be multiple reasons, right? But they are the best of athletes, right? They know how to hit the ball. They know how to. So there are certain deficiencies within which you have to play the sport, right? And typically, that number is 14% of how much you could score from 300 balls. So that tells you, practically, your efficiency is very low. And what you're watching is probably more of, more of the entertainment that comes with it. And of course, 1,800 runs, it will be boring, right? So all sixes. This is the highest recorded score. And probably this comes as a reference as the 438 game. I don't know if you've watched this game. 438 game was between Australia and South Africa. And Australia scored 434 runs. I hate to say, but one person that I don't like, Ricky Ponting, scored a huge century there. And somehow Herschel Gibbs answered, and I was very happy, and South Africa won that game. And it was an unbelievable game. So it's 24% was scored by the team, okay? Close to roughly 24%. That's the best efficiency achieved in a cricket game ever. So now what about energy efficiency? Why do I bring this example? Well, everybody knows this. Thomas, yes, it's our favorite steam engine, Thomas the Tank Engine, right? I used to have, like I said, my father and mother in the audience. So my father actually brought this for me when I was very young, and I used to always listen to the cassette, Thomas the Tank Engine. But the basic concept of steam engine is essentially you heat up coal, and you derive energy to move this forward through a mechanical motion. So the concept is essentially you can either you have some coal and you derive energy, you burn it, you heat up water, okay? You heat up water and you force this hot water, which is now steam, to push mechanically a turbine or something to make this particular steam engine go forward, a shaft, okay? So you do work on that turbine through steam, pressure of steam, right? But what happens is after it does work, the steam comes out and then it has to be cooled again to put it back into water, right? Now this is the problem. This is where the efficiency gets lost. You put in the energy. So what would happen? I would calculate efficiency by, the total work done divided by how much energy I put in as heat, right? So that is my efficiency for this process. What happens is I have to take care of this particular number also because I'm losing heat. Because while I'm translating steam to water, I'm losing heat. And that is in this equation. It's a very simple equation, not to worry too much. It's work done by the input energy, that is heat. So that is your efficiency. That is 1 minus, so what the work done is, essentially it is the input, Q input minus the Q output from energy conservation, right? You have the work done. So that essentially term comes out to be this, 1 minus Q out by Q in. You want to minimize this Q out to get maximum efficiency. But typically, you don't get maximum efficiency. You get around 30 to 40% for the steam engine. So efficiency practically can never be 100%. Is this shortage similar to what people in global warming community have? Are we trying to, as scientists, trying to propagate something wrong? Okay. So let's first ask this question. Is there a shortage? So that's really, really the critical part, because if you do not trust the scientists of what they say, then there is a problem for appreciating that and coming together as a society. So is there a shortage? Well, let's look at the statistics and the facts. Now the first things we have to get clear, even if there is no shortage, there are some issues with how we generate energy. We are in the 21st century, so we should look at technology as being used right now. We are primarily based on carbon-based fuels, okay? So those are always depleting. We all keep on reading that fossil fuels are depleting, and that's a truth. The other problem with this technology is it is polluting the environment. It is generating CO2. Now here is where the debate of which side you are on, the global warming debate, it really comes into picture. Whether you care or not, whether these whatever we are using is going up in the atmosphere and creating a shell, and you are having a glass house effect or a greenhouse effect, or you choose to be ignorant of that and you say, no, this is just something that is being created. We are not seeing melting of icebergs or something. So why are we even bothered? Well, whether or not you believe in the greenhouse effect or the global warming, temperature recordings all across the globe have shown a 0.5 degree increase in the last 10 years. So we are warming up, okay, as a planet. There are political issues we have seen. I don't have to go through this because there have been 3 wars fought on oil, and it's like really the worst thing that can go on with this kind of searching for fuels and looking for alternative options. The other important fact that our society, India, for example, is facing is the inefficiency in production, distribution, and consumption. We are still running on old technologies. State boards run the electricity here. So government is still, it has made a plan, but it's not pumping in enough money to change things. There is 30 to 40%. A group member here claims that government has a lower number. This is from the Integrated Energy Policy document that the government released in 2006. They claim there is 30% grid losses in distribution, okay? So that's wastage of energy. After you have a certain efficiency to produce it, you waste that much. Consumers not choosing energy efficient product. This is where you come into picture. You can switch off your lights. You can be a more efficient citizen in terms of putting in a little bit that you could do. For an energy status of a country, we need to find out what is our total energy consumption, right? Everybody consumes some bit of energy. Let's look at the total. So that is one parameter. Let's look at per individual family or per person how much we are consuming, that is per capita, okay? When We also have to keep in mind at what rate our country is expanding or our economy is expanding. So we look at something called a gross domestic product growth. And then we have to think of the utilization and demand in the country. So now the commercial energy consumption, you see this is India's part. By the way, if you look at France or US, it's a little bit different. US is no different from India though. But France, for example, if you look at, I don't have this right now, but I'll just give you the number. This blue thing, the contribution from nuclear, the purple thing, the contribution from nuclear, that's 1% in India, okay? France is running on nuclear power plants, okay? 70% of the electricity is derived from nuclear power plants. That's amazing. That's really like completely transformational for a society, okay? So, but most of us, all of the countries in the world mostly are coal-based, okay? There is some amount of oil, obviously. There is natural gas, which we are also good at. We have good resources. Hydro, we have good resources. We can create resources for that. We have pretty much non-existent solar part, and nuclear is small. But even if you look at this distribution, we are growing at 8%, okay? And we are the 5th biggest energy consumer in the world, okay? That probably comes from the population argument. This is per capita consumption all across the globe, okay? Look, the darker the color is, you have higher per capita, okay? US, parts of Russia and China, Australia, Argentina, Greenland, you know, these kind of countries have very high per capita consumption of energy. Look at India, we are very light, and probably the reason is we all know that 5% or 10% maybe of Indian population controls 80% of the money, right? We all know this sort of number. We do not have enough people consuming energy at the rural level, okay? So the gross average is brought down because of that. Now I bring here a very important point that all of us probably have missed in last 10, 15 years about thinking about agriculture. When I used to travel through trains when I was young, and I used to see these long fields, okay, in between two stations, and I used to always ask, like, is there, like my parents, is there something that has to be done? And they used to say, these are for agriculture, for, you know. Those things are going to drastically change in the next 10 to 15 years because we are going to inhabit, okay, a lot of land area, okay. India, even though is the 7th largest country in terms of land area, we are going to use, because not all the land area is usable, right? This becomes a very important sector for us to immediately think about. And around the world, there is a little bit of negligence about agriculture. In fact, US depends on Indian food stock. And in fact, Obama and Bush have made statements regarding we are eating more and exporting less. So things like that have been, because they are challenged in agriculture at this point. We are quite a bit of, we're quite big in exporting. Last year, we consumed 160,000 megawatt power, okay? With 30 to 40% distributional losses. We still have, and this is a lower number based on what government estimates, in 2006, so we are 5 years down the line now, but we still have, I'll put this number to be the same actually, or maybe a little bit more. We still have 125,000 villages without power in this country. Urgent need for constant power supply. I think from which part of Bombay you come from, you will know that there are certain places where there will be power cuts, and you know, depending on the situation. So I really like to call this as a mini crisis. If people want to adjust to the situation, that's a different opinion, but this is really a mini crisis, and the government needs to put in private investment in this sector. We need to put in investment in the sector, and this without any doubt. So this is the big statement that I put we really have to, we have to think of how to, get away from this problem. And I'm very happy there's a lot of young crowd here that at least will take back something and be a little bit motivated towards, being efficient. Now, this is the projection which all the young people please look at. We would need 5 times the current production by 2030, 20 years down the line, okay? What we are currently producing. Our primary commercial energy based on the growth of transports and whatever we have, transport sector, we have to be 3 times the current consumption, okay? So where are we going to bring in oil for this sector? Where are we going to bring in the fossil fuel? So we are growing, nobody's going to stop us, right? We are growing as a country, we are growing as a population, we want to grow, but we have to fulfill our demands, right, as we grow. So solar is what I'm going to talk about today, but we also have to think about clean coal technology. That is, issues with regards to CO2 burial. We are generating a lot of CO2 through fuels. Now we need to sequester them for usable purposes, and we have to do that. Technology for improved cooking stoves at homes, okay? And then setting up of this Bureau of Energy Efficiency, which the government has done very nicely. And that is where I think your question really relates to, as to how do we, have some sort of efficient appliances which do not produce too much of heat or, uses most of it for usable work. And the privatization of energy sector, this is going to be the more political issue, okay? So the government's plan are clearly to look at biogas, biofuels, and nuclear. Solar is not included, mind you, but this is where we have to actually come into picture. Now, this is a slide that I really want to motivate you by saying that we as in the scientific community, we at least we would like this to see this as a challenge for us, because we really, this is the point actually I wanted to make. This is the time you should all come to join hands and become, at least some of you should become scientists, because this is really the time where you have to stand up and deliver, okay? This is the time when you need to have technological breakthroughs, and the next 20 years will be critical for all of us as we go through this. And I've just given you some listings, and this list you can find in any internet or Google site. I do not want to go through this, but what is more important here is this particular thing. And the consequence of the atom bomb. Atom bomb was something that is a marvel in technology, but was used for all the wrong reasons. And maybe people would say that it was done for the right reasons if you ask from a different country, person from a different country. But it was a politically made decision, and it was used to destroy one part of world, okay? And what that did was amazing. It actually put the psychology of one country up on its head, and they delivered as a country, okay? Japan was crushed by the atom bomb, okay? And here is what, this is really important to realize as a country what we could do. If you should read this book, if you haven't, please get a copy. This is one of the really nice books made in Japan. Akio Morita, who was the CEO and the founder of Sony, wrote as an autobiography. And in this book, he describes how Japan actually transformed its economy by putting in a lot of intellectual effort, doing a lot of scientific developments to create a corporation that was technologically very advanced as compared to other things that came out from the world. And Sony became a leader, and it just changed the whole Japanese mentality. And it did not show its strength through military prowess. It showed its strength through its economical powers, okay, and creative powers. So this is where, this is an inspiration actually for all of us to fight something like this that we have for our own country, an energy problem. So, with this, I really want to state that we need to actually have a lot of fundamental research that has to go in. And so where should we start? So we look at non-conventional solutions. Biogas I mentioned. Wind power is something that is really, I'm going to talk about. Small hydroelectric, you all know that this is essentially a cartoon rendition. This is water coming through in a waterfall and generating enough energy to push the turbine. Biofuels is an important area, and I'll touch upon something at the end as to what these mean. Solar energy is the major part that I'm going to talk about. So let's first actually talk about just one slide on wind energy. And this is really, really important to point this out. Suzlon, as one of my group, Samarth, who will actually demonstrate you how to make solar cells, he pointed out this is actually an Indian company, okay? Suzlon is an Indian company. It's one of the largest wind turbine makers, okay? You can see its products even in India, okay, at the coastal belt of Kerala and Tamil Nadu. What Suzlon plans, and now it is putting in windmills in China, and we are now competing with China at least some of the companies are from our Indian indigenous companies. They are actually installing 1,000 megawatt power plant every year. Okay, that's their plan from next year. So as we all know, at least in our lifetime, sun is not going to dim. Okay, the next 100 years, sun is not going to dim. Yes. So so this is India's current solar flux that you are going to get 6 kilowatt hour per meter square per day, and this is an average solar flux all over India. If you were to invest 5 million hectares of land, which is roughly 2% of the land area, okay, with an efficient solar cell, now this is the efficiency number which I'll come to, 15% efficient cell, we could get 1 million megawatt per year, which will satisfy our demands, okay. And that's a calculation, very rough calculation, okay. This is a back of the envelope calculation, but this is really a very big number. I would say 50% if we get, that would be great, okay. So the current production is very low. The cost is really 10 times. If the government were to invest right now in this sector, the consumer has to spend 20 rupees to get it per kilowatt hour. So I think that's going to be a little bit challenging because the villages will be really affected. But yeah, but what is important here is the potential for solar energy and to realize that this potential can be matched. In fact, 1 hour of broad daylight gives you this much power, and that will in fact power all of planet's needs. So it's terawatt, by the way. This is TW is terawatt, this is megawatt. So there's a factor of 3 more. Okay, so what other benefits, fringe benefits from solar panels you get, okay? The fringe benefits are essentially if you were to have parabolic mirrors or even in fact solar cells, it doesn't matter, you would reflect some of the sun's light and put it on a tower where you have a boiler, okay, a water boiler. You direct all the beam towards sun's energy to heat up and create steam and then again drive turbines, okay. This kind of arrangement is actually in Mojave Desert in California, this is called the Sierra Sun Tower. It's one of the largest of its kind, and it's spread out, in few 50 hundreds of kilometers. Okay, so this kind of land investment is needed. By the way, diffuse lighting. I think you have heard the concept of diffuse lighting in certain buildings. You just in the daylight, you just have architectural drawings such that you just use sunlight to, put in light in all the rooms of a building. Of course, that will reduce the electricity consumption, maybe depending on what kind of office space you are working at, you need air conditioning, obviously. So that part might be an issue still, but at least the lighting part can be taken care of. So this is something that is being embraced by new companies and for new buildings. These are called green buildings. So we need to embrace the concept of green buildings even in our apartments. So when people need to make these kind of things, think about these small details that would help. There is always a problem in India to translate what is being done in fundamental research to actual application. There's a big gap, okay? We are not producing enough entrepreneurs to bridge that gap. Take that technology and produce something. So that is what is missing in our country. We need people to do basic research. We need people to take that technology and bring that to people. So those entrepreneur skills is needed, and this is really important. You can contribute in that as well. So right now, what scientists globally are working on is something for efficient light capture. So first we have to capture the light, okay? Just like you said, we have to store energy, we need to capture and store. Then we have to convert it. We have to make it more efficient conversion from that light that is captured to the things that we want to do. And then we need to store it as fuels, or, you know, as you had said, some form of energy that we can store it. So currently what do we have? We have these silicon solar cells. We have these big panels. And these silicon solar cells, it's not important to go into science right now. I can discuss it later. But what is important is currently the efficiency of these silicon solar cells are 15 to 20% for what you have on those panels, okay? But what is the role for a chemist? Well, we know how to synthesize new materials, okay? We need to be systematic, we need to be focused on making these classes of materials, okay? We have come up with things like nanotubes and structures. So these are all done in the last 25, 30 years. In conjunction with physicists and engineers, we need to make devices, okay? Devices which look like that on a molecular scale. And obviously, we want to explain theoretically how it works for a global satisfaction of the entire community. And obviously, you want to back it up with some experimental observations. And so all of these are really the roles that are defined for chemists for the next 20, 30 years on this particular problem. Dr. Michael Gretzel, he's in Lausanne, France. He actually came up with the concept of dye-sensitized solar cell. So going away from the silicon solar cells, you just take small molecules, and what you do is you paste. You have all done watercoloring, right? You know these white color paints. You have the white color to paint on, right? So the color paint that is white is coming from TiO2, which is the molecular name of it's the formula of titania. This is titanium particles that are suspended in that, okay? And you get these in all sorts of sweets, you know. These are quite edible, okay, in certain form. And so the white coloring is usually coming from that suspension. What he did was he made those suspension colored with a dye. That's it he did, okay? That's what he did essentially. He made those suspensions, the white suspension, colored, and then he put it on an electrode. He attached it on an electrode. And what he saw, a remarkable current if you take an electrolyte, okay, along with it. And this is the concept of dye-sensitized solar cell. There are certain advantages because these are small molecules. You can tailor their geometry, their configuration. We can make these. The only problem is right now we are battling efficiencies. We are around at 10% as compared to silicon, which is around 20%. So this is where we are actually trying to, and what the advantage is, this can be really cheap. If you can buy paint from, you know, your store, local store, you actually can fabricate these devices very well if you have a very nice technology to fabricate it. The other portions that people are working on, and I am also working on, is something on mimicking photosynthesis. No discussion of solar energy can be without photosynthesis because biology makes fuels of its own based on photosynthesis, okay? You actually have carbohydrates being made from CO2, okay, being buried. You have water and you generate carbohydrates and oxygen, okay? So this is the oxygenic version of photosynthesis. So, so this is really an important part to understand fundamentally. We are still we are struggling to understand it completely, but that's what we are doing. There is another way of doing energy storage through doing artificial photosynthesis, in which we do have electrodes and we do certain chemical reactions based on light. You have light excitation, and you do some chemical reaction to make fuels like hydrogen. Okay? So this is again a completely light dependent process to generate hydrogen. So that's essentially a green fuel. And why hydrogen? Because it is a very high energy density. You can use hydrogen and make an internal combustion engine more efficient. Okay? And it's essentially a green fuel. You have to be a little bit careful while handling hydrogen, but it's a green fuel. The other option is the biofuel version of it, in which you take microorganisms, pull it and culture it, actually live microorganisms, okay, to culture it, and you let them do certain things that you tell them to do, okay, and somehow generate hydrogen, okay. And these are all the pathways, metabolic pathways within the organism, and you can actually manipulate these pathways to generate hydrogen specifically. And so the idea would be that if you have a hydrogen fueling station at some point, you would want to have a broth of these cultures growing, and you can, you know, take out and you can fuel your car with hydrogen. So these are some of the chemical challenges that we are facing as chemists. The first one is essentially the methane to methanol problem. Methanol can be a fuel. Again, it's a carbon-based fuel, but it can be a fuel. So immediately you can use it. So methane to methanol we need a catalyst for that. So a catalyst that will work at ambient temperature, okay, at regular temperature. So we need a photocatalyst for that. CO2 reduction, I said burial of CO2, right? We want to convert that again to methanol for usable fuel. So if we just, whatever we pushed out in the atmosphere, if we could bury it, then that is the reaction we want to do. And also we want to do something called the water splitting reaction, which is water which is available everywhere, to use it and generate oxygen and something called protons, H+, from which H+ can be converted to hydrogen. So water is available everywhere, right? We can use it. This is the biggest reaction that we need to focus on. So if we can do this very nicely, we are able to produce, in fact, fuel cells and other kinds of applications. And all of this should be kept in mind, has to be done with some sort of fault tolerance, because this is wet chemistry. People don't like to handle things, right? We don't want leaky cells. We want solid state cells. So we need to put them into polymer perspective somehow, okay, from this wet chemistry to translate into polymers, functional materials. But these materials have to be fault tolerant. What it means is I can use it for 20 years instead of, say, 2 months, right? So you have to keep that in mind, and that is essentially the concept of fault tolerance, which is now becoming very popular. Now this is the reference I'm going to end with. I'm going to share that again when we start after the tea break. But all of this cannot be done without the help of my group, who are these wonderful people who are always there for me. Samarth, who is here, is going to demonstrate you how to make a solar cell. And these are all the group members. I think most of them are here, somewhere sitting, and Ajay and Hadia and Sumitra, Vijay Lakshmi, Rahul. So, and these are the collaborators we are collaborating with, all the way from Australia, Bangalore itself, and some parts of other parts in India and US and Israel. And thank you for this wonderful opportunity, and I'll be very happy to address any questions.